Ever wonder how some financial services and fintech leaders learned about money when they were kids? Well, we've asked them 4 important questions to get their answers, and you definitely want to hear them. Join me today as we hear from Heather Fortner, Chief Executive Officer at Signature FD. Hey everyone, Matt Gardner here, author of Motivate Your Money and the global best-selling children's book, The 4 Money Bears. I am joined today by the one, the only, Heather Fortner. Heather, CEO of Signature FD. Heather, for those who do not know who you are, who've been living under a rock somewhere, if you could, please take a minute and share a little bit about you, your firm, and the awesome work you do in our industry, please.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm Heather Fortner. I'm the CEO of Signature FD. We like to say we're the home of net worthwhile. So we are the place where we believe that people actually take their net worth and turn it into the thing that they believe is net worthwhile for their life.
Awesome. Now, Heather, you have been a huge supporter of the work that we're doing to launch the 4 Money Bears Berryville, first of its kind financial education platform. We like to say it's for K through 5, but anybody can play it. We're designing it so that young people can play it, parents can play it with their kids. But what we are really looking to do with this interview series, Heather, is we're really looking to reach out to leaders in the industry, financial service executives, fintech executives, folks that have been very successful, and really ask them 4 poignant questions about their experiences learning about money. So are you ready for question number 1?
Is this like a game show? I feel like
yeah. Give a little bit of that.
For 200, Mac.
There we go. For 200. What is your earliest memory of money education, Heather?
Earliest memory of money education. That's a great question. When I was thinking about how I think about money and what I remember about money, I actually thought about my life more in stages, what I was learning in stages of my life. I remember, being young, and my parents did such an amazing job. Like, I don't remember anything about money. Mm-hmm. What I do remember is that my grandmother was always there and helping. Mm-hmm. And so there wasn't an open conversation. It wasn't that money was a topic of conversation that continually happened in our home, but I do remember very specifically right before school would start every year, Grandma would come and we would go school shopping and everybody would get their new pair of shoes. And so I just got to really understand to tie my grandmother to the help that we needed in those early years as a family.
Okay, this is actually a first of these interviews that we've done, Heather. Folks typically will think about a thing that happened or remember getting money, but this is actually interesting that you're mentioning your grandparent, because what that signals to me or symbolizes to me is that it's generation. So there's levels of pouring things into generation. So your grandmother is an integral part of your sort of financial money memories. That's fascinating.
Absolutely. I specifically remember, and I guess this is why it's chunked in my head, but I remember as I got older, my grandmother was a widow. She had been a widow since my mother was 4. She worked on the DuPont manufacturing line her entire career. 40, 50 years at the same place. And I just remember her being such an integral part. And as I got older, my mother telling me the stories of, her upbringing, my grandmother's upbringing, very poor, but what she learned during those times, what my mother learned, what my grandmother learned, and my grandmother obviously, lived through the Depression. And so those moments of, but grandma's always giving us stuff. How does she do that? Why? And so those conversations unfold over time of, Well, listen, Heather, there were weeks, and I'll never forget the day that my mom told me. She said, there were weeks when y'all were little. I have two sisters, where we had $3, and we
Wow.
got a loaf of bread, and we got a gallon of milk, and we made it work. And I remember those things, and I think, I didn't ever feel like I went without. But at the same time, I always remembered, we just made do, hand-me-down clothes and that type of stuff that I, in my older years, came to recognize must have been an enormous stressor for my parents.
It may have been, but the thing that I find fascinating about those connective memories with money, we talk about scarcity mindset, we talk about abundance mindset, and how that sticks with us, and how our interaction with money is. And so it sounds to me like by sharing those stories with you, Heather, your mom was saying, look, this is where we come from. This is what it is.
That's right.
I'm with you. My father and my mother grew up in abject poverty in the Caribbean, and so always remember that there needs to be value to
Yes.
work. Your
Yes.
grandmother's stability for all those years
Yes.
was able to pour into your mom, then pour into you. And so I found it to be fascinating. That leads me to the second question, actually. What did money represent in your home when you were growing up?
What did it represent? I would have to say it never represented excess or any type of privilege. It represented survival. It represented, this is just a tool. This is just a means to an end. This doesn't define us. The size of our house never defined us. I never felt, and we lived, I don't know what it would be classified today. I don't know, but
You
I
ate.
know that
You had a roof over your head.
it was home, and
Yeah.
it was safe, and it was, and I think about the context of money, and as I grew up, beginning to learn, okay, like money is necessary, but it's not necessary to be happy. It's
Yeah.
not necessary to feel safe, per se. It's not necessary for us to be cohesive as a family, but it's nice.
Yeah,
It makes it easier.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so those were, just deep.
I'm hearing value system a lot.
Yes.
I'm hearing value system, and in doing these interviews, one of the things that we hear a lot of is the values were there, the money just amplified it. Right? Because if the values aren't there, what's the money really doing? If you are fortunate to have it, you win it, or what have you. So you talk about generations. I'm a parent. I know you're a parent as well. How do you think is the best way to teach young people about money, in your opinion?
Well, I always think the best way to teach is through example, always, no matter what, because quite frankly, if it's good enough for me to ask them to do it, then it's good enough for me to ask myself to do it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I think what I get concerned about, what's very top of mind for me as I think about my girls, is I learned the value of hard work. I learned what it meant to pay off my student debt, to take those loans. I remember how proud I was 10 years after I graduated when I made
that last payment.
Yes, I still have the paper. Like, I was so proud of myself because I had invested in myself in a way that nobody could ever take it away from me.
Yep.
But I don't want my girls to have to struggle the same ways that I did, or my parents did, or my grandparents did. And yet there were very valuable lessons that came out of those struggles.
Out of the struggle. Yeah.
Yes. And so I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about the fact that you don't want your children to grow up in poverty. You don't want that for your kids, but at the same time, you want those lessons. You want them to learn those lessons. And how do you do that when the life that you live today is vastly different than the way that you grew up? So that's, I think, what's on the top of my mind.
I mean, we're hitting home right now in this conversation because, I think George Clooney has a line in a movie called The Descendants. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but check it out. It's really good. But he says, I want to give my kids enough money to do something, but not too much money to do nothing. And so I think as a parent, if you are fortunate, blessed to have or find financial success and find a standard of living that may be different from what happened generations before, you are always challenged with how do I replicate the grind? How do I replicate the grit? How do we replicate, because we know that there's value in it, but we also know there's pain in it too. And so how do you translate that? I totally agree. I also think that giving young people tools to do things, there's lots of knowledge and education out there. I think with social media, there's almost too much knowledge and too much stuff out there.
I mean, depending on where you get your knowledge from, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Finance is one whole thing.
Right? Yeah. So finding resources that are valid and helpful, I think, is really, really important. But I totally agree with you, Heather. It has to be something where you are asking young people to do things. We're fortunate, we're blessed, we're in the business, so we can give that guidance, get education, but they've got to do it. So now leads to our last question of here, and I know it's a loaded one because you've been in the biz and you run a very successful firm. But what's the best advice you've ever been given when it comes to money?
Oh, Mac, come on.
I don't know how much time do we have, right?
I know, right? I'm not even going to say that this is advice. And I'm going to put it out there because I'm still in the process, I think, in the journey. As I mature and as I grow personally to understand what I think this means for me. But as you were talking about, how do you teach your kids, right? That example, that if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. One of the things that I learned and saw a lot when I was growing up was that even though we didn't have much, my parents still gave first. And it was consistent. And I have spent a lifetime learning about that type of generosity, that type of faith, that type of commitment to others, to the growing of others, to the support of others. And I think that what I will start with my girls are young, they're 8 and 3, but they're never too young to start. Like we have the play cash register, I'll never forget sitting in the floor with my daughter. She had gotten, like a $5 bill for something. And we were talking about, you give a certain, you spend, the money bears.
Yeah, 4 money bears, yep.
And she was like, well, do you just tear it off? And I was like, no.
No.
It was like, okay. Wait, I'm not prepared for that. But that conversation, that example, that consistent leaning into, whether you call it faith, whether you call it generosity, whether whatever philanthropy, whatever you might call it, I think that is the first model that I'm working on, because for me, everything flows out of that.
You know what's so amazing about what you just shared? So many people think that you have to have excess to give. And as you were sharing your story, I can think of so many people that I know in life that aren't very wealthy, but have found a way throughout their life to give and give and give. It is not for them. It's for the community. It's for those that are around there. So I think that is extremely powerful. Heather, you are an amazing guest. Thank you so much for sharing
having me.
your time with me, your stories with me. Anything that you'd like to share with us as we close?
No, I think the thing that I've learned, it's a fun experiment that I like to run in my own life, specifically around generosity, is that I've always found that when I have the courage to give first, that all my needs are met.
Amen. Amen. Heather, thank you again for your time. And as I like to say, the journey continues. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you'll join us for our next engaging episode. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and visit www.thefourmoneybears.com.